In Texas, Senator Bernie Sanders performed strong amongst Latino Democrats. According to exit polls, he actually garnered more than 40% of the vote.
Big jump from his 2016 presidential run, where he received 29% of that vote. Joining us now with his Super Tuesday thoughts and what it means as we inch closer to the general election is principal at the Raven Group and great friend of the show, Estuardo Rodriguez.
Good morning.
Good morning. Always great to see you. Ugly night for Bernie Sanders last night. However, if it weren't for their strategy of organizing Latino communities in Texas and California, this thing could be over today.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But I also think they overplayed their hand. The New York Times ran an article this week saying the sleeping giant awakens. And that was insulting. Just the title alone was insulting because it's almost like saying women voters wake up to the elections.
Right.
The Latino vote is everywhere and very segmented.
Yes.
The Puerto Rican population now outnumbers the Puerto Rican population in New York, in Central Florida. There are more Puerto Ricans there. There was a crisis that made them flee to the mainland. Across the country, you have Venezuelans littered throughout. The conversation around socialism. The Bernie campaign said, oh, we're never going to get them anyway. Yet they are in Florida, Pennsylvania, the Mid-Atlantic, people who are intimidated or scared off entirely by that language. Texas is not Central Florida or California.
Sure.
Those votes completely split. 30% voted for Trump in 2016.
Right.
So you cannot continue to take the Latino vote as, oh yes, we have a great Latino strategy. No, it's completely segmented.
So this is interesting, right? Is that it did work out in California. I mean, they called California.
Did it work out as much as he thought it was going to work
so
out?
I don't have the exit polls right here.
We do actually.
And we still have
California
weeks.
Latino exit poll. Let's go ahead and throw that up on the screen. Let's go ahead. We've got, he won 50% of the Latino vote in California.
Right. And they're still going to count those numbers for the next week or so. So we'll see what those numbers actually settle down to.
But if history is a guide, the margin will actually expand.
Right.
Because it was the day of vote that went so strongly for Joe Biden. I mean, we saw the same thing in Texas. Bernie was winning in the early vote. And those are the votes that will continue to be counted in California. He expanded his margin over Hillary Clinton, or Hillary's margin was decreased as the votes came in California. So I would expect that margin to get larger. But I think your point stands that you can't assume that the success that he did have in California and certainly in Nevada, also in Texas, and be able to keep that margin so close is going to translate in a state like Florida, which is coming up very soon and which has a lot of delegates at play.
Absolutely. And we can't just look at the Latino markets. The Latino vote is going to continue to be that edge that Biden will need and Bernie will need. And we saw that last night play out as the Latino population grew in many of the non-major Hispanic market states.
Like Virginia.
Northern Virginia, with the organizing, Biden's effort in Virginia was minimal.
It was nothing.
But the Latino vote in Northern Virginia is huge. It made a huge difference for Hillary last go around. And still, obviously, we know how that turned out. But that organizing structure was already there. In addition to everything else, Latinos are brand loyal. They know what Obama did. They know what the Clintons did historically for the Latino community. Yes, there's more they could have done. But Biden, well-known brand name, he didn't have to do anything. They were there for him, and they turned out.
This is interesting because what it gets at is that the Biden brand is so solid that even a year of flubs, failures, all this has not put enough of a dent in it. What can Sanders do in order to break into that, especially in a state like Florida, right? Florida's the next big Latino state that's coming up. And as we've talked about many times, very different than Central Texas, right? Absolutely. And many of these people are Cuban or Venezuelan or Puerto Rican. What can Sanders realistically do? Right now, he's up on the air in Florida with the Social Security ad. I'm not sure if that's necessary. I mean, that's an issue that applies to everybody. What do you think he could do?
Well, it's not just Florida, but Georgia's also coming up.
Right.
And the Latino community has expanded greatly in Georgia as well. I think the only thing he can do is expand this base, as he's been saying. He's going to bring in more young voters. Is it really happening? I don't think it is, because at this point his messaging is out there. He can't come back now and change his messaging because that's going to show a great deal of weakness and he'll just lose even more voters. So he's going to just dig in and try to find a way to expand that base and energize more people to overcome the Biden base. Biden, as I said on one of the shows many months ago, Biden is a safety candidate as well. Let's not give him more credit than he deserves either. It's a safety candidate, and at the end of the day, when you're stuck between two candidates like this, you're going to go safety because you want to know that someone can take on Donald Trump. And number two, you understand his values, and they understand Biden's values. Florida's going to turn out for Biden is my bet, and Georgia will follow.
It's the electability case. That's what it comes down to. For most Democrats, the number one issue is who is going to beat Donald Trump.
Right.
And so you've seen this searching around, especially in the suburban vote, searching around. Who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? Media says it's this one. Media says it's that one. We're going to go to Pete. We're going to go to Amy. We're going to go here. And then when you had all this coalescing at the last minute around Biden, it was like, oh, that's the guy.
Right.
That's the one. And so to me, that's the core thing that you have to convince people of. And you had a much stronger hand to play when you were the only one basically winning states. You say, look, I'm winning. Of course I'm the winning candidate.
In a crowded field, too.
Right, in a crowded field.
Not to give Sanders too much, but he was 28, 35% in some of these states. He wasn't snowballing.
Sure, but that was a great electability case to make, that I'm winning, so yes, I can win. Now you have to be able to reclaim that as a much harder landscape, because now you have a narrative of you're not winning anymore and your margins aren't going. You haven't added to your coalition. The young people haven't shown up the way that you've been saying that they would. How do you make that case? We see what they are starting to do, which is to go after Joe Biden on Social Security, on trade. These are issues that are not just, a contrast with him, but they're also about electability, because those are issues that Donald Trump will surely weaponize against Joe Biden the way that he weaponized against Hillary Clinton. Is that the best play?
I think it might be a good play for Bernie, but the bigger challenge I think Bernie has is that Biden has been playing the slow and steady wins the race, and he's slowly been building. And those conversations with Klobuchar and Buttigieg, they were happening for weeks. There's no way they just turned that around in a week, right? So they knew that if they weren't going to pull a majority, that they were going to have to coalesce around Biden. And his camp, Biden's camp, is just going to continue to grow. Can Bernie expand his party, his base?
Right.
And will Elizabeth Warren ever come on board? And I doubt she will. But I think he absolutely needs her.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens next week. But at this point, if Bernie doesn't change his game and actually show that he can drive people to turn out that haven't turned out before, this is the comparison with Trump. They were constantly saying he's the Democrats' Trump. He's bringing and reviving a base of voters. Keep in mind, the U.S. has a 46% voter turnout every presidential election.
Right.
You have a huge gap to fill, and Bernie should be able to show that he can fill that gap now, not wait till November.
Yeah, no,
Right.
that's true. I mean, he has to validate his central thesis if he actually wants to win.
He's got to be able to add to the coalition. The one thing I will say is we saw how quickly this race changed once.
Exactly. It may change
Joe Biden is still Joe Biden, so it could well change again.
It may change again.
But
On the Latino vote side, it's going to be critical to stop thinking about it as, we've got the Latino voters. No, you don't. You have a segment, and Trump has. Unfortunately, as a Latino, I'm embarrassed to say, Trump has a huge segment, and it's not 10%. It's 18 to 30%, depending on where they are.
Yeah,
and it's all based on faith and religious values.
None of these demographics can be taken for granted.
Certainly.
Absolutely.
So, Estuardo, great to have
Thank
your
you,
insights.
Estuardo.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Coming up, Joe Biden savored a political resurrection on Super Tuesday as voters restored him to frontrunner status. Team Rising is going to weigh in.